Hello everyone, my name is Christelle Cochico. I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us as we delve into the latest updates on the current biosecurity delays in Australia. Our agenda includes the current situation and the impact to importers, including resulting container detention, industry response and advocacy, and a response to support you, and finally a live Q&A. Before we begin, let's run through a few housekeeping items. Firstly, please input all your questions on the chat box below and we will go through them during the Q&A later. Secondly, your feedback means the world to us, so please take a few moments to complete the survey after the webinar. Thirdly, a recording of this webinar will be distributed to you via podcast by the end of the week. And lastly, if you have any questions at all after the webinar, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Firstly, we have Shani Knox, Mondiale VGL's Head of Customs and Compliance. Shani has over 15 years experience in tariff and international trade. Some of you will probably know her and the work she does in helping you on complex valuations, tariff disputes, import permits, free trade agreements, and duty management. Up next, we have Paul Zalai, Director and Co-founder of the Freight and Trade Alliance, or FTA, one of the leading and prominent advocacy bodies in the freight forwarding and supply chain industry. Paul has extensive experience in ministerial appointed roles, one of which is the Secretariat of the Australian Peak Shippers Association, or APSA, again, one of the leading and high-profile advocacy groups in the industry here in Australia. Last but not the least, it's my pleasure to introduce Sal Milici, Head of Border and Biosecurity, also at FTA. Sal is a licensed customs broker with over 20 plus years of experience and a focus on international freight forwarding and supply chain logistics. Sal provides FTA members support as well as engaging with key stakeholders such as the Australian Border Force, the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, or DAWE, and the Port of Melbourne. So I just wanted to say welcome again to everyone. Welcome to all our speakers, and let's get started. Shall we first look at the biosecurity, the current situation with biosecurity? Is that you, Paul, or Sal, who will be taking over?
Christelle.
Oh, Sal.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Without doubt, the biggest pain point for our members, our valued members, Mondiale VGL being one of them, is biosecurity. Probably workforce shortages might be a close second after talking to quite a few of our members at a recent event we held, but definitely biosecurity was the main topic. I'm going to refer to the department quite a bit. That's the language that I use. And when I say that, I mean Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, being one of Australia's largest public service agencies with about 6,000 employees. They're a bit of a beast, to be honest. So talking about the challenges and emerging threats, the first one there is BMSB. So a large outbreak was found in Queensland earlier in the year, about 6,000 bugs. Really sent a shudder through the department and the whole industry. The thought of BMSB being expanded to include China. Thankfully, we were confirmed on the weekend that at this stage, it's not going to be added to the additional measures for next BMS season, which starts in September. But the place where the outbreak was found will be monitored. Moving quickly on to Capra beetle, that's a pest that's been around for many years. It's traditionally managed by cargo risk and origin. So, for example, corn from parts of Africa, that would be managed that way as being high risk for Capra. COVID changed shipping patterns quite a fair bit, and containers that were normally used in certain trade routes found their way coming to countries such as Australia. A famous couple of cases was high chairs from Italy and fridges from Thailand. So they're low-risk goods from low-risk countries. And those were found in the community. So people found them when they were unpacking their baby chairs. So really, really concerning. Conservative estimates are that it took about 30,000 hours of the department's time. So that drained quite substantially the number of resources. What it really highlighted too is that there's a need for contact tracing, which we've all learned a fair bit about, but for shipping containers. The department really needs to know where every shipping container's been for the last 5 years, because that's how long a Capra beetle can live without food, believe it or not, and ideally what's been in the container. That's information that isn't available. Perhaps international shipping lines have it and aren't keen to share it, but it's something we're really pushing that is shared because it's what's really needed. I've got the buffer is disappearing there. So there's 3 diseases that the department's really, really concerned about. African swine fever raised its head a couple of years ago. Lumpy skin disease, and that's a disease found in pork products. and would decimate the pig industry. Lumpy skin disease is a bovine disease, so it affects cattle and the like. And that raised its head a few months ago. And just in the recent few weeks, foot and mouth disease has also been found. Now, I put the buffers disappearing because those diseases weren't found in our northern neighbours, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, etc. But that's where they have been found. So they're literally right on our doorstep, and that is taking up a lot of time of the department's resources. Quickly, some other challenges are workforce recruitment and retention. As I said, we put on some events during the week, and we had quite senior representatives from the department. They pointed out that a lot of the people who apply for jobs there want to be dog handlers, but most of the jobs are really desk-bound or out in the field, crawling under muddy machines. So it's a challenge for them to retain and recruit staff at the best of times, especially in times of low unemployment like we have now. And then on top of that, there's the opening up of the borders for passengers. That's diverted resources from cargo, and that now includes also cruise ships. I'm just going to spend a bit of time on the reforms and what they're doing to try and improve things, considering the challenges they've got. One's a green lane trial, which is something we've been pushing for a long time. It's really exciting. The official term is that entities with mature supply chain assurance arrangements in place can actively manage biosecurity risks using those controls, establishing the case for a trust-based biosecurity risk management scheme. Simply, that means that really mature organisations with sophisticated supply chains can essentially apply for an arrangement where their shipments don't need to be either document assessed or inspected, depending on what the goods are. New approved arrangement, that's one where sort of low-level inspections, rural tailgates, they're called, containers that are going to be unpacked in rural areas, will be able to be inspected by industry. So that should free up some staff from the department to do other things. I know there's a few food importers. The department's reviewing the imported food legislation. The last time it was issued was 1992, so it's quite getting old. So hopefully that's going to be, a more modern piece of legislation, more flexible, better suited to today, and also incorporating food requirements into BICON. I'll probably talk about the biosecurity portal in the next slide. And there's also new screening technologies being explored. So things like 3D cameras on cranes that unload containers, and even getting detector dogs to even detect certain types of pests. Just onto the current performance. So there's document assessment. That's where documents are obviously assessed and potentially released on that. Not hearing that that's an issue at the moment, but I know the department's really just keeping their head above water, using overtime to keep ahead of that. And they can't really force anyone to do overtime. So that could be an issue. Bookings is definitely the biggest pain point. We're hearing stories of up to a week to receive a response. So a shipment needs to be inspected, a booking's put in place or requested, and no response received for about a week. Hearing that there's a minor improvement, which is with the biosecurity portal, which is a way where people can book inspections online rather than through email. But the behind the scenes process is still manual, so there is still some challenges around the bookings. I'll quickly wrap up there that the short and medium term outlook, I think there's some light at the end of the tunnels with those reforms I've mentioned, but government moves slow, so landing them is taking some time. Without wanting to make light of it, there's a good chance that light that we see at the end of the tunnel at the moment is a bit of an oncoming train. I think it could stay as it is for now, or even get worse before it gets better. Thanks, Christelle.
And thanks, Sal. Again, as Sal said, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. Sal mentioned some of the issues around document assessment, inspection and treatment delays. That's been an ongoing problem, and with that's causing delays in containers getting released, going to your facilities, getting unpacked, and then those containers going back to a nominated empty container yard. With that, as some of you may well know, the shipping lines will administer container detention fees, generally giving 7 days detention free, and then after that charges occur. So biosecurity delays is one issue. Another thing that we had, particularly during April when we had all those public holidays, is public holidays and weekends are still counted as days, even though the empty container parks contracted to the shipping lines are closed. The other difficulty is the detention clock with many of the shipping lines, quite incredibly, starts from the time of discharge, yet the container may not even be physically available. So again, we're pushing for any detention period to start from the time of container availability. What we have seen, particularly over the last couple of years, is empty container parks being congested and many times at capacity. So with that, then we have redirections of empty containers to alternate facilities, and quite often there's a time lag in being able to secure slots there. And then it's not just imports, obviously our exports come under a similar attention, and circumstances where the export container is rolled by the shipping line. And again, we're finding that the shipping lines are administering fees even when their vessels have been rolled. So that's some of the current challenges. So what's happening? Again, this isn't unique to Australia. It's happening in other parts of the world. And we're watching very closely what's happening in the US, where the Federal Maritime Commission has a regulatory role there to safeguard the interests of shippers. So what they've done in recent times is they ordered a cease and desist order on Hapag-Lloyd and forced them to pay a penalty of over $800,000 as a civil penalty for willful and knowing violations of the Shipping Act. Wan Hai Shipping Line as well, they settled out of court but still had a penalty of $850,000 on detention cases. So where does that leave us in an Australian context? And how big is the problem, I suppose, is an interesting question. We've actually commissioned a bit of work, which we're still working through at the moment, but preliminary research showed that about 45% of all import containers over the last 3 months incurred detention. So we've been doing a bit of work with an entity that's been able to receive the gate out data and then the gate in data at a lot of the empty container parks. And so with that, approximately the average container detention fee is about $900 per container. So we extrapolate that against all containers, we're talking about $1 billion a year. So conservatively, let's say it's half of that. We've got $500 million a year, plus another $500 million a year, which we know about in terminal access charges administered by the stevedores. We've been able to use that as a part of our headline to try and grab some media attention to say that the industry is paying at least another $1 billion a year in these surcharges and fees, and that's above and beyond record high freight rates, surcharges and the like. Okay, so what have we been doing it? Freight and Trade Alliance. We, over the last couple of years, we've been pushing very hard for an independent review, and we were successful on the 10th of December last year. The now previous government, the Treasurer Frydenberg, announced on the 10th of December that Productivity Commission will do a review into Australia's maritime logistics systems. We put a detailed presentation together. I won't run through all of the items that we put there, but one of them was again in relation to regulation of container detention practices. We submitted that in February, and then last month we put in supplementary submissions on terminal access charges, but again on container detention. We submitted 25 pieces of evidence that members kindly gave us permission to use to highlight the unreasonable nature of the container detentions. Okay, so I can see I need to get a new jacket because I'm still wearing it here and now, but we've been very active in the media across various different forms. The mainstream media have picked up on it. The one on the top right-hand corner was probably the most telling. The Sunday week ago, I was interviewed on Sky News, and I'll ask Christelle to send you a link to that recording, but that focused particularly on container detention issues. What we're looking for out of all of this is some form of regulation that's similar to what we've got in the Federal Maritime Commission, and on a couple of different fronts. One, on administration of reasonable detention fees, but also looking at other aspects as well, including competition reform around some of the exceptions that international shipping lines have from a normal Australian competition law. So I think that gives a bit of an overview. What I would also like to say too, a bit of a plug on what we do. So as well as working with large freight forwarding companies, we're working with a lot of major importers that are on board as members. So if any of you listening today are interested to get more directly involved in our advocacy activity, we'd be more than happy to work with you in partnership with Mondiale VGL, and it'd be great if you could join our alliance. Okay, so I think I will now hand over to Shani.
Thanks so much, Paul, and good morning all. Please bear with me, I've got a little bit of a cold this morning. Very much appreciate the update from the Freight and Trade Alliance and some of the challenges that we are currently facing. And certainly looking forward to hearing further on the advocacy work and the inroads that are being made. Speaking from a Mondiale VGL perspective, we are being impacted by the ongoing delays to service standards, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney, where the demand for DAWE services are at its highest. In terms of inspections, we are currently experiencing a 3 to 4 week delay in Sydney and Melbourne, and for other locations, which includes Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane, in most cases are being turned around within the week. Look, I'd just like to take a quick moment just to highlight that the teams, particularly warehouse and customs, are putting in a massive effort to try and minimise the impact to clients, which does involve a significant amount of time calling and following up with the department for updates. Whilst the outlook, does seem a little bleak over the coming months, we are assisting it in a number of ways, and this includes connecting with other third-party approved arrangements to understand their capacity and capability to be able to assist. We are shifting containers where possible if the resulting outcome means a quicker inspection, and of course if there is a cost benefit in doing so as well. This is very much an industry-wide challenge and not isolated to Mondiale VGL. So those other approved arrangements are in the same position with regards to delays being experienced. However, we're going to keep those lines of communication open. We're also proactively speaking with shipping lines to negotiate and extending those free days, but this is very much on a case-by-case basis. In addition, we are requesting, overtime consistent basis outside the standard hours of business, which does include the weekend. We're being very flexible and accommodating in our warehouse teams if it means that we can get more officer time on site. So just as an example, on the Sunday just gone, we were able to get 7 hours of DAWE overtime at our Banksmeadow facility. And to facilitate this, we put on extra staffing. So our priority is very much clear the backlog and gain some momentum. We've also been very open with sharing the challenges that we are experiencing with industry bodies like the Freight and Trade Alliance, who are advocating on our behalf with those higher levels of government. Look, sorry, I know that we are running a little bit short on time, but just a couple of other points just very quickly. As mentioned by Sal, there is a new biosecurity portal which will make bookings simpler and faster. Most importantly, it will allow us to track the status of our bookings. So having that extra visibility is going to allow us to pass on those updates to our clients in a more efficient manner. So at the moment, we are going through the setup phase and we should be live in the system within the next 7 days. Also, more uptake of visual label inspections for food and beverage is also going to assist to save officer time and add more capacity to deal with other inspections. DAWE are also looking at passing over real tailgates to industry, which will again allow for resources to be shuffled to those stress areas. Thanks so much, Christelle. Back to you now for questions.
Thanks, Shani, Paul and Sal. Let's move on to the live Q&A. If you have any questions you'd like to ask, please lodge them in the chat box below and we will endeavour to respond to them live. So our first question that we received during the registration phase is from Helen. Can you please provide a basic explanation of biosecurity procedure, plus why it has been impacted so badly? Is this something you can help us with, Sal?
That's a really great question and probably a challenge to do it in a timely fashion, but I'll give it a quick explanation. Essentially, the procedure is based on risk. So each commodity coming into the country is assessed on how risky it is or isn't. And then what has to happen to that commodity coming into the country is then determined by the department. And that's all we mentioned BICOM. It's all in that library of information that's web-based. And that will direct what needs to happen if those goods are to cross the border. Some goods are completely prohibited. Some goods need an import permit, which needs to be applied for before the goods arrive into the country. Some goods need to be inspected, or some goods might require testing. I'm sort of going backwards on levels of intervention. Some goods might need to just have a different type of inspection, and some may just need the documents to be assessed and where some sort of declarations are provided. And some don't need anything at all. Why is it being so impacted badly? That's a really complex question again. I think the most obvious one is that this is a really complex process, clearing things through biosecurity. And I think we discovered how fragile the system is through the pandemic. Years of underinvestment is probably another reason, and that's something that doesn't get fixed quickly. Like a lot of government departments, they've got ancient sort of legacy IT systems that don't talk to each other. A really risk aversion is probably another one. And, probably rightly so in a lot of cases because of all those risks that are on our doorstep. And then, COVID, same challenges that, everyone that's listening today has had around vaccines, workforce, and so on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Sal. Our next question is from Nicole. Would it be better to fumigate BMSB at origin? What is the cost difference, time savings, timely container dehire? Is this something you can help us with, Shani?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thanks for the question, Nicole. Look, speaking very generally, yes, treating at origin is usually quicker and more cost effective. However, there are variables that need to be considered, and this includes things like capacity of origin. Will delays impact the ability to get space, effectiveness of the treatment, for example, weather conditions, legitimacy of the treatment provider? Look, I would recommend that further advice be sought with your Mondiale VGL representative just to understand what solution may be best to your given circumstances.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Shani. Our next question is from Craig and Rasika. Why would a biosecurity officer place a post-BMSB inspection on a container and book it for 4 weeks later? Sal, can you help us with this one?
Sort of a two-part question. So the post-BMSB inspection is done to ensure that if the goods have been treated as they should have been, that the treatment actually works. There are situations where treatment providers don't do the right thing, and the only way to really know if they are or aren't doing the right thing is to a targeted approach on inspecting some of those containers after they've been treated. The 4 weeks later, I guess that's more a function of the delays in the system. Why 4 weeks? Basically, that's just the first available date that the system generates. But ideally, it's not the actual inspection date. I did a bit of research on this, and I'm advised that when a booking's made, if the term ready now is included, that quite often the department will work to get a better inspection date. So hopefully it doesn't actually happen 4 weeks after the booking's made.
Thank you, Sal. Our next question is from Richard. Does anyone record the delays between booking requests and attendance so we get an idea of the costs involved? Shani, can you help us with this one?
Look, yes, we do monitor the date of booking to date of inspection. However, dates can change, and we are seeing bookings being bumped at the last moment and with minimal notice. So we are needing to consistently monitor and reevaluate. So look, I guess in short, really the full costs are not known until we get a biosecurity release. So any costs that are provided are estimates only based on those date projections.
Thank you. Thanks, Shani. Our next question is from Jared. He's just posted that live to everyone. Can you see BMSB change from a season to a permanent requirement? The window between seasons is getting shorter each year with more countries listed as well. I'm not sure if this is Paul or Sal that you can assist with this question.
If I may indulge, just before I do answer that question, I just want to pick up on something Shani said. And if you're getting inspections cancelled at the last minute, I'd be really eager if you could share some of those examples with me, because often when we engage with the department, that's not the story we get. So it'd be great to get actual examples of that happening so we can raise that with them. I don't think the BMSB dates will change. The nature of the bug, I'm not an entomologist, but I think in those times of the year, it's not a risk. It's only really through that September to May period. So we got an update on the weekend, and we were basically advised that really there's not going to be any change next season from this season.
Our next question is from Tiffany. Can we ask for support from the government if there is a delay from DAWE when they're processing BMSB post BMSB?
I'm happy to join in this one. Or Paul, you might want to help me out. We actually went to Canberra. It might have been 18 months ago, and we met with Minister Littleproud, then Minister of Agriculture Littleproud. He really made no apology for delays. His first, second and third message was that he's here to ensure the biosecurity of Australia and protect the Australian agricultural industries and environment. So there is an option to take sort of a kind of legal action if the department makes an error. But I'm advised that is rarely successful and often takes about upwards of 12 months to be successful. Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, look, just to add to that too, I think the question was asking, is there an avenue for more information? And it's a topic that we've been discussing most recently. Sal has a fantastic relationship with the departmental representatives, and a lot of the members do go to Sal, and Sal's been able to quite often find answers. But the point that we make back to the department is that's not scalable. Sal and FTA can't be a help desk or an alternate means of finding information. We really do need to fix the core issues. So we've suggested that they put together like a triage group where they can escalate important inquiries and then use that data to start trying to identify the root cause of problems. At the moment, we're just putting band-aids on top of band-aids to try and keep cargo moving. And it's something that we are going to be very much focused on in the months ahead, especially now with the new government, to try and get some sustainable improvements.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Next question is from Raj Kumar. He says, whilst COVID has been a concern over the past couple of years, which has delayed global freight forwarding, and we have experienced significant delays in inspections through DAWE, just wondering, why wasn't a proactive measure put in place to engage any other third-party approved agents to speed up the container clearing process? And how confident are you in finding an alternate arrangement?
Chris, I'm happy to take this one. So look, we have very strong relationships with other approved arrangements, but I guess really just to highlight again that this is an industry-wide challenge, and it's very much not isolated to Mondiale VGL. So the delays that we are seeing, those other approved arrangements are also seeing those delays. But again, we are communicating, and where there is an ability and there is capacity to take those containers, then we are actioning that. And look, it goes vice versa as well. Those other approved arrangements are also reaching out to us to understand our capacity to see whether we can help too.
Great, thank you, Shani. Our next question is from Mia. Is there a website where we can find out how many days we have left in container detention? If you're a customer of ours, Mondiale VGL, you should have that information on hand on OneTrack. Mia, if you don't mind, we'll just reach out to you outside of the webinar and give you a bit more information on that. Our next question is from Alexander. Are Mondiale VGL having any success in requesting extension of detention-free days from shipping lines? I'm not too sure if you can help with that, Shani, or is that something we also need to go offline?
Look, it is case-by-case basis, and Paul, you might be best suited to answer, I guess, the shipping lines position, but look, if I can be completely transparent, we're not having a great deal of success. Look, in their terms and conditions, they're very strict in terms of when their detention starts, and they're not very flexible. But look, it depends on the shipping line, actually. Paul, did you have anything further?
Yeah, look, I do. We're talking to a lot of major importers and other forwarders on a regular basis, and also with the different shipping lines. Times have changed. So really, the shipping lines are in such a strong position at the moment, and even traditional loyal relationships and even major importers and exporters at the moment don't seem to be getting any privileged position. And again, it's not even through the local people that we're speaking to here in Australia, the shipping lines, they're even sympathetic to the situation, but again, they're just reporting back to overseas masters and following direction. And it just seems to be pretty cut and dry that very little concession is being offered to importers and exporters and forwarders around detention.
Thank you, Paul. I think this is going to be our last question, only because we've run out of time. It's 11:35 now. This is from Craig. In the previous BMSB season, we had our containers fumigated at origin and had 5 shipments sent fortnightly, ex-USA, held up for post-BMSB inspection, which holds up the whole shipment. Not just the allocated container, which delayed delivery, incurred storage and detention charges. Is there an alternative approach that we can do to avoid these things?
Sal, did you want to?
The department's not going to alter their post-BMSB inspection process. As I mentioned earlier, they do that to ensure that the regime is working. The only thing I could probably suggest is maybe, which obviously has other costs attached to it, is splitting up the shipments so they're not all on one shipment. But I don't know, Sian, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, look, I think that's a good point. Look, in terms of BMSB, if you do have a consignment that's not subject to BMSB in that classification, then again, if it's feasible, don't ship it with those BMSB goods that are covered by those classification headings. So again, I'd probably just recommend, reach out. We can understand your situation in a little bit more granular detail, and then we can best advise.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Shani. And I think that's it. We have to wrap up. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists, Shani, Paul and Sal. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any other questions or concerns, because as always, we are here to help. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.